I know we've been asking a lot of important questions over the past couple of days, but I have potentially what might be the most important question of all to ask you. If you heard an unusual noise, what do you do? And I ask the question because I've probably asked that question hundreds of times over the course of my career to hundreds of cast members during my 10 years at Disney. We called it the unusual condition quiz. And it was a big part of my job as an operations manager to walk around the operation and talk to people while they were in position in the flow of work and ask them these challenging scenario questions to make sure that they were ready for the unexpected. And when you think about it, the unexpected is just kind of the reality for frontline workers, right? Because there really isn't a typical day when you're part of the frontline workforce between things like stockouts and technical downtimes and upset customers. Dealing with the unexpected and troubleshooting those unusual situations is just part of what you do as a frontline employee. But the unfortunate reality is that frontline work can go from difficult to dangerous without warning. And that's why we see that 40% of frontline employees are currently scared to go to work, because they're dealing with the increasing number of incidents in workplace violence, organized retail crime, weather emergencies, and all of these other unexpected situations. And the reality is that we can't stop every bad thing from happening. But what we can do, and what we absolutely must do, is make sure the people we're responsible for supporting have the knowledge, the confidence, and the capability to make the right decisions when they matter most. So the question is, how do we do that? And you heard from Chris and Kara earlier today in our product conversation, the real focus of Axonify is about enabling the individual, making sure we meet each person where they are in terms of boosting that confidence and that capability so people are ready for what comes next, even when it's the unexpected. So that's what I want to dig in today as part of our next panel. How do we prepare frontline employees for what might happen during their next shift? And our panel brings a variety of different perspectives to this conversation as practitioners, as technologists, and as service providers. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Trevor Garrick, Director of Retail Learning and Development at Harbor Freight, Mary Beth Garcia, CEO of MOHR Retail, and Kevin Tapscott, leader of Global Solutions Center at Zebra Technologies. Spoiler alert, this will be a bit of a sobering, serious, but timely conversation that I know everyone here is already having, but we especially need to have when we're talking about frontline enablement. So I want to get perspectives from each one of our panelists when it comes to, in the work that you're doing in the organizations you're supporting, what are the biggest challenges you're seeing facing frontline workers when it comes to the kind of unusual, the unexpected, outside of the day-to-day expectations of their job? And I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's what you were talking about a minute ago. People are just going through a lot right now, right, outside of work, and they're bringing that in with them. And gone are the days, thank goodness, where we say check your emotions at the door. I mean, we need to create that safe space for them, but we have to be aware of what they're walking in with. You've got politics, you've got wars and things that are happening, and we really have to prepare our environments for them, where they can come in and not feel like they're walking in at DEFCON 1. We just exist ready to go off. And they have that space where they know they're supported by their leadership team, by their peers, and really just giving them the tools and equipping them to be able to deal with that.
Mary Beth, how about you?
Well, we serve the retail community in training and consulting services, but I was a client of MOHR, so I've had a relationship for every 40 years because I spent 25 plus years in retail, store operations and communications. And retail is always long hours, on your feet, low pay, and that was always hard to recruit. And it was always hard to get people engaged and be passionate about the career or the possibilities. And that's always been, and then the pandemic, right? And that's where it really shook the world because safety just got highlighted. And not that shoplifting and crime didn't happen, particularly in luxury brand and some of the jewelry stores and things, but this has become, since the pandemic, the safety of our employees' health, mental balance, and everything they had to turn on the dime. Our clients went from essential to non-essential. So the essential had to stay open and get masks and have the plexi shields and social distancing. And the non-essential had to kind of wait for direction. And from a client's perspective, I'll never forget that moment that we had LVMH, Louis Vuitton, listening to every breath of Whole Foods Market. And that would have never happened 2 years prior when I've had the two of them talking, but they were trying to decide the commonality. So I think that's something that heightened. And then I think what's happening now is recruiting. Who wants to work in retail? First of all, we need people to shop in retail. We need people to come to the stores, but we need it to be an environment because the business and the stores are not single environment, or single coverage. That's a safety issue. So I think recruiting and making retail and the service industry fun and exciting, I think, is the biggest challenge. So how do we attract people to want to work in an environment that's getting a lot of bad press these days? So we've been through some cycles and journeys. I'm looking forward to the future of retail and service industry being exciting and fun again.
Kevin, how about you?
Thanks, JD. I lead a team within Zebra. I think many people know Zebra as a hardware company first, and I lead a software team of retail, healthcare, hospitality experts that provide solutions that are very adjacent to what Chris and Kara talked about right before this session, which is solutions to enable frontline workers, give them confidence in their role. And because of the things that Trevor and Mary Beth just said, that's a real struggle. So Zebra's mission is to, in many ways, literally, put the capabilities that the employees need in their hands so they have, I heard the word confidence a lot from Chris and Kara and you, and give them confidence that they have the tools and they're able to do the job that they're being asked to do. I'm biased, but of course we feel like putting something in their hands so it's like instant is a good thing. And we work closely with Axonify on that exact front. But whatever ways that we can supply across our solutions, there's a lot of different modalities to communicate, push to talk and telephone and chat and messaging. Lots of differences between businesses, lots of differences within retail between sub-verticals. And we pride ourselves in being able to provide specific solutions to specific businesses with their specific needs to give their frontline workers that confidence that they need.
Yeah. So Trevor, for some context, how many associates and how many locations do you support at Harbor Freight?
So we have 1,460-ish. I say ish because we open about 2 stores a week on average. About 22,000 associates in the field. We're in all 48 states outside of Alaska and Hawaii.
So it's hard to go a week at this point without seeing something in the news or seeing a video go viral as related to retail theft and organized crime. And we hear a lot about the business impact of that experience. So we hear a lot about conversation around store closures and lost revenue and adjusted earnings and these types of things. We don't hear a lot about the human side, specifically on the side of the store associate who's facing this issue. So I'm curious, how is this conversation impacting your team's ability to do their jobs, whether they face the situation directly or they just hear about it and see it a lot in their industry?
Right, yeah. We've really leaned in on equipping our associates, our employees to handle this from the human component, right? Everybody has SOPs, how to handle active shooter situations, trainings like that, shoplifting, what to do in that case. But it's really important for the associate to know what to do in the moment, because if you think about it, you can train somebody all day long and they can know all the right behaviors, but in that instance, everything goes out the window. So they really have to know how to react and how to recognize what's going on and kind of take a step back at that moment. And it's not even when it happens, it's really kind of, to your point, it's anticipating that these things could potentially happen. So there's a lot of skills that we'll lean into for the associate that doesn't have directly to do with a particular instance like shoplifting, but it may be more on how they respond or how they can take a step back and really take that emotion out of it in the moment and make the right decision.
There was something, I was having a conversation with a few different organizations recently around this concept of preparedness and how people feel about this kind of shift in focus in training and focusing on these potential situations. And one of the most unfortunate things I heard in that conversation was that younger associates seem to be more comfortable and more ready to deal with an unfortunate an act of violence or an act of theft inside of a retail store as compared to people who are maybe a little bit older and even more experienced. And that's a bit counterintuitive when you think about it in terms of the people with less experience in the workforce and in this environment feel less ready than people who are younger and don't have as much professional experience. And then when I probed a bit and asked why, the reason they came back with was, well, people who are younger have been through a lot more active shooter drills in their school environment, so they have a level of familiarity with this idea and they're bringing that into the workforce. That stopped the conversation in the most unfortunate but kind of a very realistic and grounded way. So again, sobering conversation, but critical conversation to be had. Definitely. So along similar lines, I know I just took the conversation way down, but Mary Beth, from your perspective, there's already a lot going on. So we hear the words do more with less, do more with the same resources. Balancing staffing is always a critical consideration in frontline organizations because it's often your biggest budgetary lever. There's a lot of change coming down from the corporate team. And now we're talking about preparedness as something that we have to add on and have to have people across the organization, especially frontline management teams, they have to care about this and be motivated to make time for these types of conversations and make it more than, back in my movie theater days, I was required to do a twice annual safety town hall. And so I got everyone in a movie theater and told them all what would happen in a case of something bad, in the case of a theft or someone tries to hold up the box office, and demonstrated how I would handle that situation. I never accounted for the person that we hired 5 days after the town hall. And what would they be thinking about as they wait for that next conversation? So from your perspective, how do we get people motivated to put the effort and the priority around this conversation? Because we're talking a lot about what might happen when there's a lot that is happening day to day within your frontline operation.
That's a loaded question because there's a lot of angles that we can go there. I think first of all is the preparedness there has to be that core foundation. And I think that's, obviously Axonify's platform, that consistent message to all at one time and being able to get that. I think there has to be that foundation training that reflects what the company's initiatives are, and it's, which is the next level, is it has to be top down. It has to be supported from the top. So if these are the company initiatives, that they have to understand how the company wants this to be handled in that situation. So I think some consistency will help with what you're talking about is when something happens out of the ordinary. And so if you have a foundation, I believe that foundation will keep them a little bit more level-headed and not have to pivot so much to create a policy and create situations that maybe are not how the company wanted them to handle. So I think foundational training is really important. I think we talked a lot about this yesterday, and I just can't, the human factor that Trevor just talked about is so real in our industry. And it's not just retail, it's banking, it's hospitality, restaurants. Anyone that's your client-facing industry now, you've got to be able to show people they care. That's why that's the recruiting and the training aspect, but they have to, once you get them onboarded, they have to feel like you care about them and you've got their back. And that's an improving environment. It's not a proving environment, which retail can be very, we get a report card every day, we get measured on everything, and we have to take that and balance the performance metrics, but it's who's delivering those performance and really doing that. So I think that giving them a good foundation so that when there's an emergency or an urgent, an active shooter, a robbery or safety concern, that they're not pivoting so far. They've got that foundation, and the only way that they'll get that is if it's reinforced by their leaders. Just when I came in the airport, Draper James, Reese Witherspoon's retail stores, they did a campaign, the store in the airport, and I thought about it. And thinking about our conversations and what's going on in retail is they have a campaign, what would Dolly do? And they got the mugs and the t-shirt, what would Dolly do? And I think we need to have more role models and leaders at all levels of the organization that would help reinforce what the company wants them to do. And that's words and actions. And I think the actions are what's the behaviors when they're in the stores, the behaviors and the communication being more of that improving environment where it's allowed to make a little mistakes or not have all the answers. We'll just help you through this and feeling like the company cares.
And Christine talked to this yesterday when she was speaking with Dick Johnson from Foot Locker, the idea that safety and preparedness is not a topic that goes in the list of other topics that people have to be trained in. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. What we've seen that's interesting as Axonify is when you take the idea of safety from something you experience during onboarding, or maybe something you experience once a year as part of a compliance conversation, and you add layers like reinforcement to it, it's not just about the training you receive in Axonify anymore, it's about the conversation that facilitates, and that's where the culture shift begins. So the organizations we work with, especially those that we worked with for a long time, that talk about having this robust safety culture and the position that Axonify plays in it, yes, a lot of that is the knowledge retention and reinforcement piece, but it's also the way that the technology stimulates a conversation, keeps things top of mind, and gets people talking about it, but also reminding people that this is important, this is something we're going to do over and over again. And that's a major culture change component that I think you don't necessarily expect when you talk just about kind of training and technology. And Kevin, I want to take that to your side from a technology perspective. We know that the technology is a tool, it's not a solution, but how do you see the role of technology in emergency situations and preparedness, and what difference can that make when technology is in the hands of the people who need it to respond appropriately?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's just coming off the product keynote that we just saw and experiencing all the different capabilities that Axonify delivers for its customers is a reminder of what you're talking about. At least this is how I see it, is it's about engagement. And as soon as we've all lived this, when you hear that there's kind of a monolithic corporate training coming, your initial reaction is an eye roll. And the eye roll might be the opposite of engagement. When you feel like what you're learning or what's being shared with you or what's accessible to you is for you and it's tailored for you, that's interesting and that's exciting and that drives engagement. And just to bring that back to technology, it is technology that enables organizations to administer personalized content in a way, whether it's accompanied by real-time push notifications on a device or it's just simply in their list of things to do. It enables personalized content and a number of other ways to actually punch through that eye roll and engage the associates in a way that they're interested in learning more.
And to relate to Max, I can't tell you how many times in my past as an operations manager, how much value I would have gotten from a Max-like experience, because I remember moments where I was standing in the operation half a mile from my desk, wondering what was the SOP for this particular, what's the right decision to be made? And it turned into a situation where I'm relying on the people near me to nudge me in the right direction, and that they've been here longer than I am, so maybe they have the right answer. Was it always the right answer? Was it always the thing that was going to keep us as safe as we possibly could, or as efficient as we could be? I think I did a decent job at that, but there was a lot of learning by trial and learning by experimentation. It wasn't necessarily as supported as I could feel, so I had that confidence to make the right decision. So I want to kind of expand on that idea of training with you, Trevor, to say, you mentioned skills that are essential beyond executing the SOP. So when we talk about the human side of preparedness and emergency situations, what are some of those skills that you're focused on at Harbor Freight that you find are most impactful for people feeling confident to deal with this kind of situation?
Yeah, so one thing we really have leaned into is this idea of avoiding emotional hijack. And what that means and the way we explain it is that, like I mentioned earlier, you have all of the knowledge that you need to respond to a situation, but you react with your primitive brain. So it's fight or flight, right? And being able to recognize that's happening and stopping that, kind of stopping what you're doing, reframing the situation and redirecting yourself, that's a skill that you can apply across various situations that really is outside of the SOP, but it does allow you to take a step back in the moment and really understand why you're responding the way you are. And it's a skill that's proved to be very valuable. I think even in shoplifting prevention, I think everybody probably has a no chase policy, hopefully. And regardless of that knowledge getting to all of our associates, we gave the training, they took the reinforcement, everybody's scoring really high, so they have the information, they were still chasing people. And so we asked ourselves, why are you doing that? And it's really, you get caught up in the moment and you react. And so we actually put this training out and really put a focus on it for all of our associates, and we saw our incidents drop to from about 20 some odd in a month down to 2. I mean, it was that powerful, just keeping it front of mind for associates and really getting them to think about why they're doing what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And along those lines, I think there's an interesting balancing act there, because we talk about ownership and accountability and wanting people to take ownership and have pride in their work. And then we contrast that with, and then let people do bad things.
Right.
So how do you help people balance that so that they still have that pride in their location and in the work that they're doing, but they make the right decision when they need to, based on not just the policy, but the right thing to do is for themselves, other customers, their peers? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's just really getting them to understand that there's nothing that we sell in the stores that's worth their safety. And that comes from the top down. The owner has said that before. Every leader in our company better be saying that as well. They have a personal connection to it. I mean, obviously we want our associates to take pride in what they do, and I feel like they do, but not take it so far as to feel like you had to protect that $19 drill with your safety. And we have a lot of great leaders out there that get this point across. We have some trainers that work in my department that have some great stories they share. We have a lot of great storytellers in the training in the L&D department. And they will talk about previous experiences where they, maybe in their younger days where they were a little overzealous, went after somebody and got stabbed with a pin. And what if it wasn't a pin? What if they pulled something else out of their pocket or out of their purse? And so kind of getting those stories across to them and letting them understand that what's really important is for you to be able to go home to your family. You come to work to make a paycheck to support yourself and support your family. And if you don't go home safely, then what's the point of coming in to begin with?
Absolutely. And Mary Beth, I want to follow up on that point around modeling the right behaviors and the role of managers. If anyone can't tell, I'm relatively obsessed with the importance of managers in the frontline workplace. So what do you see as the role of managers in modeling the right behavior, enabling this, and how do we make that a priority, given that we've already talked about how burned out managers are, how we continue to add to their plates, and this is likely at the top of the list, but how do we make sure managers are focused on preparedness in addition to everything else HQ might be asking for?
It has to be top down, and there has to be the leadership culture that we support our people. We support those who support our customers, and that they have to feel. I thought that was very powerful yesterday at Marriott when you talk about, and I think it was just talking about how the employees have to feel like they are as important, as the customers, and that the company can serve them. And I think that's that whole employee customer profit chain that's been around for years. So I think they need to feel that, and how the leadership role, I couldn't agree with you more, is so important. I believe that the district managers and the regional managers, and especially retail and services operations, have the largest scope of influence in our organization. They are the closest to the customer, and they're the closest, they have to represent the corporate office. And so they are your middle managers in corporate America and retail and services industry. And I think keeping them motivated to model those behaviors, because I think modeling and that behavior more than telling is really important. And that means asking more than telling. And again, retail's detail, and we have a lot of direction, floor sets, when they have to be done. There's certain, initiatives that we're very telling about, and compliance and consistency is so important. We can't forget that human element. And, and Trevor's talked about too, is just really making sure that they understand we care about you more than that merchandise. We care about you and you staying here, enjoying your work, and being able to build a career with us. They have to feel, you mentioned competence, but it's confidence first. I feel confident that the company has my back. And how that is modeled is through your district, your regionals. They're coming to the store leader because they need to model the communication skills of asking, not just telling all the time. Even if it's a floor set, we know there's certain parameters, but how's this going to impact your store, and you're an urban environment versus a rural environment? Getting that store leader to be involved in it, to understand the why, I think is important. And that does have to do with empowerment. It also has to deal with empathy, and empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is really, you don't have to agree with them, you just have to understand where they are right now. And I think that's where the soft skills are really important, the softer communication skills of modeling those skills so that a store leader knows, well, my district manager treats me this way, so I know I need to treat my front line this way too. They have my back, I'm gonna have their back. So it's definitely a show me versus a tell me, and that's where you gotta balance that in retail.
And I think that reinforces the importance of continuous investment in the local frontline community, in that location, whatever line of business you're in, because we can't just expect people to trust because we're talking about safety and these kind of critical topics, but the other things aren't as important, or we're not going to put the investment where we're not talking about these hypersensitive issues. So making sure that we're doing anything we can to, I often talk about giving managers permission to lead their teams, because if you bury people in administrative requirements, and they're often in the back office for whatever reason, they're in the back office and they're not out there building that relationship and trust, when these types of things happen, or when people have questions saying, why aren't we doing more? Why are we letting people take advantage of us? Or why are we letting people steal? They have to be able to trust the words of their manager, because frankly, they don't see the corporate team. They don't see us very often, right? The company to a lot of frontline employees is the manager, and the manager has to have that relationship, but we're in a position to be able to enable that relationship and prioritize that relationship. So I'm curious, from a Zebra perspective, how does your team think about the role that managers play in enabling frontline teams, and then how you build technology and resources that would enable that manager?
Sure. I couldn't agree more with Trevor and Mary Beth around the values and the top-down nature and the importance of that. How we think of our contribution to the big picture is that we feel like we can connect workflows and remove friction from the frontline manager's job. I loved so that they can deliver on outcomes for their customers. I loved the drill analogy that Kara and Chris used about outcomes. It's not the drill, it's the picture of the family on the wall.
But drills are important because Trevor's here.
Drills are very important.
Drills are important.
We love the drill analogy too.
But for us, for example, the drill might be a workforce management solution where we could take 4 hours a week or 14 hours a week out of a frontline manager's back office desk job trying to wrestle with a schedule, as opposed to out on the front lines with their employees, helping customers and helping them help customers better. So if we can connect workflows, automate some things, give them time back, make it easier to do their job. When organizations invest in technologies, a perfect example is our partnership with Axonify and the connection there, that even if there's small workflows between task and training, they're workflows that give time back to the frontline manager, and that's the most precious thing they have. So especially in this environment of burnout and just challenge at the front line. So I think we think about what can we do for the frontline manager that gives them the ability to spend more time with their employees and less time in their office.
I just have to add, because burnout, and it's like a buzzword in retail. It's real. Mental illness and the challenge, and it started with the pandemic because roles changed, and you and I were talking this morning about this, and you said it at the opening, is there's so much going on in the world today outside of the retail environment, outside of the business environment, the pharmacy department, the banking department, divisions that we have here represented. There's just so much going on in the world that causes a lot of anxiety, and we really have to recognize that. And I think that what you just said about giving them back time, I was talking also to Fiesta, and you said we both were in agreement that when managers, they get stressed, they're short-staffed, they start doing the job. And when they start doing the job, then they kind of get this tunnel vision, and they're all tactical, and they're not, and so where's the rest of the team that are there and showing up for work? So it's something that's why I said those district managers have to be, and they're under a lot of pressure too, but they've got to be able to lift up and get the blinders off them and say, hey, I have confidence in you. Let's get the staffing under control. Let's get that, because, we teach coaching skills, and I hear from store leaders that say, I'm on single coverage. When they come in, I got to get the shipment out. I've got to do all this. And so it's a matter of that time freeing up, I think, is so powerful, to give them time to work with their people, to do more strategic, which is all the human elements of the job of a leader, not the tactical of getting the shipments in and so forth. But they get so, that I got to throw myself in it. And that's really the sign of burnout. It really is a sign of, I'm going to take care of it, I'm going to do it. And what happens is they just start, going downhill. And that's harder for performance because then their performance is down. And so as senior leaders, we have to always say, what's the root cause? Not, oh, Joe's performance is really sliding now, It's, no, what happened? What's going on? And then you can look at the other factors, the other metrics in the store and say, let's get to the root cause and let's try and help Joe. Because if we can help Joe, he influences the team, and that will help us all.
Trevor, I'm interested to get your perspective on how are you thinking about enabling your location managers to be able to have the time to have these types of conversations, to model this type of behavior when they, I'm assuming, have a lot going on in a growing retail environment?
Right, yeah, they definitely have a lot going on. We have a focus right now on agility with our managers, with our leadership team, even more so going into next year. But it's just like Mary Beth was saying, when you get stressed, you tend to run on autopilot. You do what you've done before because it's probably worked sometime in the past, but being able to get them to recognize that's not always the right solution, I think is the first step. That it doesn't really lead to greater productivity. It may be a short-term win, but you're kind of giving up that long-term gain because you're just doing what's going to fix the current situation, what's going to put this fire out versus preventing the fire that's going to be coming down the road. So really focusing in on that for our leadership team and helping them understand how they have to change up their mindset a little bit and switch the way that they're approaching it depending on the specific situation or even the person they're talking to.
And I'm curious, does this conversation influence at all, not just how you enable managers and what you help them focus on, but also how you think about choosing managers, right? Because I think it's been said multiple times the last 2 days, a lot of times managers are elected because they're really good at the job, and they're there, and the manager walks out the door and you need the next person up who can run this business to step in. They're not necessarily the best with people. They're not necessarily the best with understanding that kind of counseling side of being a manager. How do you reconcile that? Because you usually just, you don't get your pick of all the people. You kind of need who you've got to be able to elevate to this type of capability.
Right, yeah, we were the worst at that. I'm just going to be candid. You were the hardest worker, you are now the manager.
You got promoted.
Yep, you got promoted. We fortunately have changed our own mindsets over the last few years. And even in the way that we select our talent, instead of looking for, we do have behavioral-based questions, we look at past performance, but it's more about what motivates you as a person. What are your traits? Do those align with what we need in our future leadership? And that's helped us bring in a much higher caliber of associate. It also, just a little modest brag here, we were certified as a great place to work, which does not hurt when you're looking for candidates as well. But we've been able to hone that a little bit, and we're not perfect. We've got a lot of work left to do on how we select our talent, but I think we're definitely headed down the right path.
And along those lines, Mary Beth, I'm curious what you're seeing in the different types of organizations you work with, the conversation around talent acquisition, who people are hiring, who people promote into these types of roles, because it's one of these domino type situations where if we don't start, we can't just think about the challenging situation and doing our best with who we have. It's how do we build the talent base and the community within an organization that's then more ready to be prepared and more motivated to be prepared when these types of situations arise.
Yeah, I've seen a big trend, and I like it because it's all about succession. And I think that's where, you just have to take a look to see how do we promote people to get people ready before they get the job. And so I am excited. In the last few years, we have a lot of clients that are working on emerging leader programs. These are like your key holders or just before that. They're going, they're in that track, and you want to try to engage them so they stay with you, taking even part-timers and putting them through these emerging leaders that aren't all the performance management and leadership, but giving them some more empowerment of making decisions and helping and teaching them so that they're ready when they go into the the role, because we know retail is notorious for, I think we all have been, handed the keys, and like you said, 8 months later you get into the leadership training. So I think I've seen that. I think particularly with the pandemic, we've seen that swing, that people are wanting to hold on to people and grow their own leaders. And I think grow people, even if they're not on the leadership track, but be able to leverage their strengths. And that's something that is between emerging leadership programs, we're seeing that, and I'm excited about launching that with clients. But I'm also think that they're also being able to determine what's individual needs. And they may not be the retailers that we had before. People that attracted the business is style. We use DISC, some of you may be aware of that, but just to leverage their individual styles and so forth on that too. And I think the third thing I have to say is partnerships with other divisions that maybe weren't partnering before. I work with a very large discount off-price retail chain, many brands, and one of the things that I think they've been doing really well is partnering, that the district managers and the district LP managers do store visits together mostly. They work together, so safety and compliance and developing people so that everybody, I think, has been good partnerships too, is getting help to help grow the people in the business, help attract people that want to have careers in retail, showing there's other options that people can take.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we risk in this conversation is when we allow kind of preparation for the unexpected to become routine. And by that, what I mean is, does any organization have like Safety Month or Safety Week? And whenever I see Safety Month or Safety Week arise, I'm always curious what happens the other 11 months of the year. And right, is this just an opportunity for us to elevate certain conversations, but it's still an ongoing conversation? Or do we feel like me back when I was a 20-year-old manager and I had my biannual safety town hall, I've done my job, because we had that conversation. And what I would contrast that with, I went from a world where I have to have 2 town halls a year and now we're good, to a world where at Disney, we had unexpected evacuation drills. So what that essentially means is I'm a park operations manager at Walt Disney World. You all are causing me a nightmare type of a situation because you all don't want to wait in line for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. It's all your fault. But so I'm dealing with y'all having these types, that's the Southerners I get, by the way. I say y'all, but that's really about it. So I'm dealing with y'all having these challenging conversations because you're upset that you had to wait in line, and then a ping goes over my ear and I hear the siren go, and it's an emergency preparedness drill. And I now have to sprint my way to a specific location because I, as the manager of this location, am responsible for this part of the park evacuation process. And if I don't get there in under 2 minutes, I'm in trouble. And I'm gonna get a phone call about why I didn't get to my response gate as fast as I could, and then they put a box on the gate, and I have the keys to that box. I open the box, and there's a code word in the box, and I call the duty manager, and I say who I am, where I am, and the code word is this. And now I can come back to having a conversation with y'all. So if you've ever been at Disney World and you're talking to a park manager and they just run away unexpectedly, like in the middle of the conversation, it might be because we're on the clock, because we're in the middle of one of those preparedness drills that we have over and over and over again, because that's just part of the reality of the operation in which we work. So I want to ask one more question to kind of wrap up. It's similar to my question yesterday, which is the one thing question. So let's say, again, everyone in this room, we're dealing with a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different priorities within our organization. Hopefully this conversation around preparedness and the unexpected is at the top of that list already. But if there's one thing that the folks in here can do to help their frontline workers become prepared for the unexpected, what might happen during that next shift, what's one thing that you would recommend? And Kevin, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, your point off the top about the best reactions in sudden situations were the youngest employees it stuck with me. It reminds me, on a brighter side, I'm a Midwestern kid who lived in Boston for quite a while, and I was there during the peak of the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era, and although he wasn't nearly my favorite coach, the thing that I understood about why the Patriots won so much was Bill Belichick's commitment to coach situational football. So the situations that almost never happened or would rarely happen were the one, he'd spray water on the footballs to make them wet in practice so they had a hard time holding them. 30 seconds, no timeouts. 15 seconds, no timeouts. all of those things over and over again. So it became natural for the team to perform in those situations that rarely happened, and they won a lot of football games because they did that. So I feel like there's a parallel there with these, just as you said, safety month in and over. It was always wet football day, it seems like, in their practices, and it paid off. And so I think finding ways to use technology to be able to keep the training thread running through the year, week in, day out, week in, week out, is key.
Mary Beth, what's your one thing?
I think the one thing, and it's double-sided, but I'd say the one thing for the retail and services, hospitality, is if you work for an organization, volunteer to work on a Saturday or Sunday this holiday season, or if the holiday isn't, like, because I know that's not a big at Harbor Freight, if it's a gift business, it's big, but just work on a Saturday and Sunday in the store and be humble and learn and not be judgmental, but just to go there and really keep your ears, as we talked about. We have 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Let's leverage that, a listen and our 2 eyes to see what the field is going through. That's the one thing. The second thing is for those of you that are not, and even for those of you that are in retail, but those of you who are not, buy in a store, shop in a store, and have that same perspective of what's going on, what can we do? And because I think that the whole online, we know it really exacerbated on with the pandemic, but it's a matter of being there and seeing what they go through, and kind of it goes 2 ways to help that dialogue, especially when they're the only one in the store or 2 people in the store, and be able to start a conversation with them to make them feel more human.
Yeah, we all have the opportunity and the power to brighten people's day when it comes to frontline work, because we're the folks they have to deal with. So
I know.
Every opportunity. Trevor, last word to you.
Yeah, so we should have connected before because you took yours and mine, I think. But it's really just, the one thing you can do is listen to your associates. Be in the stores, be in whatever locations you have, and find out, where they're coming from, what's on their mind, what's bothering them. Because until you know that, you're not equipped to handle that and really set up that environment where they can thrive. And I think aside from that, it's building trust. We hear trust come up a lot, and it's probably the most important skill that you can then have with your teams, because if they trust you, they're going to come to you, they're going to feel more comfortable, and then when things do happen, they feel like they're in that safe environment.
Absolutely. So great place to wrap up. And just to answer, I started this conversation by asking you all a question. And the question was, what do you do when you hear an unusual noise? And the answer is you stop the ride. And every Disney cast member, if you ever go to or any theme park you go to, you ask that question, they're going to know that answer because they get trained on it on day one. And then we reinforce it over and over and over and over and over again. Because the reality is we don't know if they'll hear that noise, and we don't know when they'll hear that noise. But we know that what that noise could mean for them, for their peers, for our guests, and for our business. So that's why I think this was an incredibly important conversation to have. And I'd like to thank everyone on the panel so much for joining us.